a little story was told to a friend. That little story about Jesus, when he was walking down the road with a number of his disciples, when on the side of the road a group of people harangued him and scolded him and decried him, but Jesus just turned around and blessed them. So when they'd gotten further down the road, one of the disciples said to Jesus, "Jesus, why did you not scold those people? Why did you not say something to them to change them?" And Jesus said, "I can only spend what I have in my purse." This question's been asked over these last days. If we are no longer the pencil with which God writes, as Mother Teresa has said, nor are we the hole in the flute through which God plays, as Hafiz has said, then what are we? There's a story about a certain great rabbi in a time in Europe when there was great unrest and a lot of bad things happening to the Jewish people. And this great rabbi was on a mission. He was going from town to town to raise money to release a group of Jewish families that had been incarcerated incorrectly. Well, he came to a certain town, and in this town there was a man who was famous, or infamous, whichever way you like to look at it, because he was the meanest man. Even though he was inordinately rich, he was mean. And it was known that whoever went to him to seek alms was only ever given a rusty copper penny. And all of the people, no matter how poor they were, would throw that penny back in his face. Now when the great rabbi arrived at this town, he went to the synagogue, and he said to those in the synagogue, "I want you to take me to the house of the miser," naming his name. And those who were gathered said, "It's no good going to him. He's not going to give any. All he gives is a rusty copper penny. It's useless going to see him." "No," said the great rabbi, and he chose two of the rabbis amongst the group to go along with him to the miser's house. And when they got to the doorstep of the rather palatial residence in which the miser lived, the great rabbi turned to the other two rabbis and he said, "Please, whatever you do, do not intercede or make any comment about that which happens inside this house." So the rabbis agreed that they would not make any comment at all, and the door opened, and there was a rabbi resplendent in his velvet garment, his smoking jacket and so forth. And he greeted them rather amiably and invited them in and sat them down on his rather opulent couches. And the great rabbi stated to the miser, well, his case, that 5,000 rubles was needed to release these families who had been incarcerated. And he said, "Oh, tut, 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 oh dear, 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 the Jewish people, they have suffered. I wonder when we'll end their suffering. Wait, he said, wait a minute." And he went off and he came back with a little velvet purse. And out of this velvet purse he took his rusty copper penny. And he gave it to the great rabbi. Well, the great rabbi thanked him effusively. "Thank you. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you for this gift. Thank you, thank you. And he even wrote a fancy receipt extolling the virtue of the miser for giving this gift. And then the rabbi and his companions left, and when they got outside the door, one of the other rabbis hissed, "You should have thrown it back in his face." And the great rabbi told him to be quiet, and they went off down the path, and all of a sudden the front door opened, and the miser said, come back in. Can you come back in for a minute? Come back in." So the three rabbis went back into the miser's house, and he sat them down on the lounge again. He said, "How much did you say that you needed for the 5,000 rubles?" said the great rabbi. Well, said the miser, "Here's 1,000 rubles." And again the great rabbi went to great pains effusively to thank him, and again write a flowery receipt extolling his virtues. And off they went down the path again. And no sooner had they almost got to the garden gate when the front door opened again. Miser said, "Come back. Come back for a minute." And back they went into the house again, and the miser paced up and down, and he said, "How much did you say you needed again?" And the great rabbi said, 5,000 rubles. Well, said the miser, "I've decided to give it all. Here. And taking out of his velvet jacket pocket, he counted and see if it's all there. And of course, again, effusive thanks and another flowery receipt. The three rabbis went out of the door down the pathway, and the two rabbis turned to the great rabbi and said, "What miracle? What did you do? What miracle is this? How could you have gotten that miser to give 5,000 rubles?" And the great rabbi said, "This man is no miser. No man really is. But he has never before had the experience, the pleasure of giving. Everyone who he gave his copper coin to always threw it back in his face." What does this mean for us when we ask the question, if we're not the pencil and we're not the whole, what are we? So the question that's asked of us today is, what is the true nature of giving? And this means that we have to look at ourselves deeply. It's a moment of truth for us. The next time we give, to look at what's behind the giving. If there's one trace, one thread, one thought of receiving anything in return, or getting recognition for it, then there's something telling in our life. What in this place that we arrive at, where we seek the answer to the question, if I'm not the pencil, an instrument, if I'm not the whole, which again is something played on by an outside force, then what is it? What is it that I only have in my purse? Do you see what's being said here? We have to look very carefully now, very carefully indeed, because if there's one thread, one filament of self there that seeks any recognition or has a thought behind the giving, then we have to very carefully do some homework. and you better come and get a big hobnail boot up your rear end. What is the true nature, the real nature of giving? Look to yourself the next time this arises in you and see for yourself. And if you do, I've got my hobnail boot right at the ready.